Hello everybody. I have been dreaming about owning a Pro 1000 and I hope that happens pretty soon. I'm still looking for a good buy, but there doesn't seem to be anything around my area. The best I can do is $999. That's after a $300 rebate from the original $1,299. So I may have to bite the bullet and go that route. Anyway, the Pro 1000 has so many amazing features and also idiosyncrasies that we have discussed in the past. But one of the most important features is an internal spectrophotometer that will recalibrate your printer if it starts to deviate. And I mean deviation, basically, say you are printing today out of the box, you get a perfect result from a standard image. In other words, it's neutral, it's not too light, it's not too dark. And then later on down the road, you start seeing slight deviations in either density or color. Well, you can run an internal calibration with this printer. And being that it is built in, that means that you don't have to have any external device to, say, print out some charts and scan them and then create a new printer calibration. Now, what the heck is a printer calibration? Well, think of it this way. Say I have 1,000 Pro 1000s, okay? They roll out of the factory, but it is impossible for them to calibrate them to the same exact minute exactness, okay, or accuracy. They will differ. They will have a certain leeway that they will differ at. But the driver knows what the calibration points should be. So say for instance you set it up. In my first scenario, your standard print printed perfectly. Okay, so say for instance your standard print prints a little bit magenta, okay? And you're using your basic driver settings. The driver settings has paper choice. Oh, there's a lot of stuff in that driver, by the way. But paper choice, quality, and then by choosing that paper choice, not only does it set paper thickness, the type of surface coating, in other words, that will require different ink densities to be laid down on that paper, but also it will load up a profile for it. So you're basically printing kind of with color management, but you know, it's not as exact as going through, say, Photoshop or Lightroom or some other application that uses color management. But still, you should be able to get a perfect image out of the printer, out of the box. So say, for instance, it comes out a little bit magenta. In other words, your neutral pictures, your black and whites on that standard image come out a little bit toned. You may have to run a paper calibration, okay? And that's an internal application within the driver. And you would actually run it on the driver, possibly, or run it directly off of the LCD screen. And what it will do is going to ask you to load some of the paper, the same paper that you were having slight trouble with. It will run a set of patches, it will retract it, it will dry it, and it will then read them, and then it will correct any deviations it sees. And the result should be a calibrated printer that by itself, using a standardized image, should produce a perfect print, okay? Isn't that wonderful? Now, let's change the situation. Now you go and you buy some other paper. Well, you can run the same thing again. If it's a luster paper, you would choose a luster setting. And then, depending on the thickness of that paper, you would then adjust the thickness, the other different parameters, physical parameters of the paper, plate and gap, thickness setting, and so on. Maybe ink density as well. And then run it. It will run a calibration. It will determine whether it needs to add more density, less density, whatever. And then it will allow you to save it as a paper name. So you can choose Rodriguez paper luster and call it that. And that will appear as a future paper choice in your driver. Isn't that wonderful? That is amazing. So anyway, that's been around for quite a while on the higher end Canon printers. I'm talking about the, like for example, the 6400 IPF printers. That's been around. So It's nothing really new, but it's something that has never been introduced on a smallish 17-inch printer. We're talking about 24-inch and larger. So that is wonderful. And so in the future, if there's any deviation, say you switch over from OEM inks to third-party inks, there's going to be some color deviation. So you can recalibrate that printer by running that process. And it will take into account the new inks rendition, because it's going to print those patches, it's going to read them, and then it's going to recalibrate the printer so that the printer knows how to change the proportions of ink as it's laid down, for instance, and it will then give you a closer to OEM look without having to create any custom profiles. This is what I hear. Now, I tried reading the section on that subject on the extremely large instruction PDF for the Pro 1000. Oh, it was a lot of reading. And so what I recommend is for you guys who already have this printer to give that a chance and run it. See how it helps you out. Now, going back to my original scenario, 1,000 Pro 1000s, and you want them all to be the same, you have to calibrate all of them. Okay? You would think they would do that at the factory, but they do not. That's left up to you, because they figure that inks are going to change by batch a little bit. There's no such thing as perfect ink manufacturing. There's going to be some deviations on every batch, just as there are going to be deviations on every batch of paper. So every time you change something major, change a complete set of cards, run the calibration once again on the paper that you are printing on. If you're printing on many papers, you'll have to run it on many papers. But that's how it is. And so that will, for instance, calibrate that printer so that it prints perfectly on Canon Pro Luster, for instance. Who wouldn't want that? And then you can go ahead and, of course, create custom profiles if you really need to tweak the last bit of quality out of a Pro 1000, which should be just tremendous. All right, that is it. Thank you once again. Don't forget to share, subscribe, and all you Pro 1000 owners, and there's a lot of you out there, it seems, keep an eye open, keep an ear open as well when I have the news for the refillable system for the Pro 1000. If you are interested, if you are going to stick to OEM, of course, that is my recommendation for the best quality. But you will be paying about $60 a cartridge, which is not that horrible. I mean, you know, that's how much ink costs, unfortunately. The same thing for the same size cards for Epson. Unfortunately, there is no source for cheaper cards for the Pro 1000 as of yet, because it has not been out that long. So there's not going to be a lot of surplus cartridges around. So, all right, that is it. Thank you again. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like. And until the next time, happy printing, everybody. Bye-bye.